Well, hello again. Pastor Ray Barnett here. And I'm glad you could join me for another installment of what is, as I've explained, if you've seen the videos, a pilot in an experiment to see if this, if the subject, which is dealing with anxiety, depression, mental health issues, has enough interest to warrant my time to be doing these. My plan again is to do them each day on a five day a week basis. In any case, what I would need you to do if there's interest is to subscribe to the channel, to hit the notification buttons, because things could change as far as what time I upload them, which it really doesn't matter, because for some of you, you'll be watching them in the morning, some it'll be at night, others in the afternoon, but at least you'll be posted. You'll be alerted that I've uploaded a video. But if things go the way that I hope they do, then I'll do a 5-day a week teaching on the subject of God's answers for anxiety and depression, and it also includes obviously mental health issues. Now, yesterday, April the 14th, 2020, today is April the 15th, 2020, I was sharing with you my story. I'm going to have to rely on you to go back and review those videos that are posted here on my personal channel, Pastor Ray Barnett. Very easy. Church channel, by the way, is the Time for Truth Ministries, so it's not very complicated. Time for Truth Ministries has my sermons that I do here Sundays and Wednesdays, Bible study. And then this channel has me doing a personal teaching for you. But this is part 3 and the final part of my story of what happened to me. Well, just shy of 50 years ago. It's a long time ago, but it radically changed my life. Now, as I mentioned in the previous installments of this section of God's answers for anxiety and depression, this section, these couple, there'll only be 3 videos, 3 presentations. It's called My Story. Let's show you how or why I came to Christ, how I came to Christ, as well as, and also just the events that led up to it, and what God has done for me. As I already shared with you, that I'm going to be putting this into a book form, which will have much more detail. These 1, 2, and 3 videos, first 3 videos on my story, is just barely a sketch of the whole story, and I'm hoping that the book will bear that out. In any case, a good book, one that really holds your interest, it has to have, a plot twist. Some of the best books and the best movies have a surprise element in the book or the movie that makes you say, "Why? I never would have guessed that." My story has just that, a plot twist. So I'll give it to you, and I'll share it with you now. It began, as I already told you, 1970, through an incident with marijuana. I wasn't a drug addict, didn't like drugs, but again, I rely on you to listen to the other videos. It was laced with LSD, PCP rather, angel dust, something like that. And I went into a psychotic state and stayed there for almost 4 years, 1970 to 1974. And then Christ, in a very dramatic fashion, came into my life before I had met a preacher, a teacher, or a Christian. No one, ever shared or explained the gospel to me. That's on the first two videos. And so from that point on, as I left off yesterday, as I was telling you, my life took such a dramatic turn. People were just noticing the difference in the way I handled myself, in the way I appeared, my countenance, my face, in everything, my behavior. It was just a radical change. And keeping in mind, I still had not been inside of a church, nor had I met a preacher, pastor, Christian, born again, nobody. Nothing. It was just God himself made the change in me. And so the woman, the girl that I was dating at the time, we got married. We knew each other in high school. She was a cheerleader. I played football, and we hooked up after high school. And that was one of the first things that she noticed, the great change, the big difference and change in me. And we fell in love. And we've been together now for 45 years. And so we discussed with her as time was moving on, and we were both born again, her and I, that I knew I had a call to the ministry. And my wife has always been a very, very supportive individual and a great helpmate to me, just in life in general, including ministry, very involved. And so we went along, and the very first assignment that I had, well, first of all, I was in prison ministry for 7 years, and always sharing this story on platforms in various locations. And I was a song leader in the church. I was a youth leader in the church. And, things were going well. Then finally I went into full-time ministry, where I left my secular job. And I was about 29 when I went into ministry with, being paid for being in the ministry. Our first church was in the Bronx, and that did very well. 4 years or so, it had built up. We had a church building, and everything was going well. And remember, this third installment is the plot twist. I don't know, maybe I'm spoiling the book if you see it finally advertised somewhere, but I want to give it to you. Anyway, the plot twist. Well, we did well, and then I just felt that my work there in the Bronx was finished, that it was over. Though the church was really great, the people there are still friends of mine. We had a great, so it wasn't anything that made me leave, except I just felt like I'm supposed to be someplace else. In 1987, we came here, where we're at now, to take over this church. And when they had a pulpit committee at the time that interviewed me, and they had candidates, and when they called me back, we were still in the Yonkers. They were interested in me becoming their pastor, and again, I just knew this is where I was supposed to be. It is an area that doesn't have a lot. In fact, it has very, very little. And my wife, asked me, she said, why are you taking that church? It's nothing like you. There's nothing there. And my response at the time, and it still is to this day, is that I didn't come to see what the church could give me. I came to see what I could give to the church and to the community. So I've been here 33 years. Anyway, in 1987, we moved up here, came, and what happened was, now we had good success in the Bronx, but up here it really took off. The ministry literally exploded. I wasn't here but a short time, and the sanctuary was filling up. People were coming from all parts of not only this county but other counties Within, let's say, 6, 7, 8 months, I began a radio broadcast, which I still have, and that's been on for 30, 33 years. And that's done well. So, it was just, there was so much activity. I had a secretary, I had one staff pastor. Later on, I would have as much as 4 staff pastors and a couple of, bookkeeper, secretary. There was a lot of activity over the years. And the church was just doing so great. I'd be up there preaching, then I would sing a song, or vice versa, sing a song, preach. We were spending a lot of time at what we call the altar, when people come forward and praying for people. We were water baptizing people. People were actually getting healed, because I would share my story occasionally from time to time. Certainly shared it when I first got there, and it attracts people in the right way, because again, it takes one to know one. So if you have troubles and you have especially anxiety, depression, mental health issues, people were just coming. Then when the radio started, that was just, the church was just, the ministry was doing very well. We had at that time 3 children, and as the ministry continued in the next couple of years after that, it was just continually growing in every way. 1990, we had another child. It was our 4th. Altogether, we had 5. But in 1990, we had another child, and everything was just great. I mean, this is the real plot twist. Life was going great. And I'm bringing you this third part of the story to share with you the fact that lightning can strike twice. Now that's a loose statement when it comes to my story, because here's the twist. I really, I'm saying to myself, I hope I'm not ruining the book. If you watch this tape, you say, why should I read the book? But it'll have a lot of interesting details in it, and explanation of what I went through as a teenager into my early, till I was about 20, and then what happened to me in 1991. Well, so everything's going great. Family's doing well. Church is doing well. I really couldn't have been any better. Lived in my first house. I always lived in apartments all my life, and so did my wife. We had never lived in a house. And now we had the parsonage that the church provided, which is now our home because we bought it. And there were just so many blessings, it was just going so great. But something began to happen to me, which was this. I was always feeling drained all the time. Now, of course, you're probably already guessing what did it. But I didn't have that kind of insight at the time. I was always moving all the time. Phone was always ringing. Activities, people coming, showing up at my door and whatever. But it was all good. There was nothing really bad. It was all good. This is where life takes unexpected turns, and it certainly took one for me. So, 1991, our youngest child is a year old. The others are still all young. The oldest, I think, at that time was 10. And then the next was 8 years old. Or I have all young children at the time. And I would find myself sitting sometimes in the afternoon, be a beautiful sunny day. I had every reason to be happy. Every reason in the world to be very happy and excited and enthused, which I was. But I was just so drained and so tired all the time. And then this strange thing, came on me. I would be sitting, for instance, I remember once sitting on the edge of my bed. And I'm not really prone, everybody's different as far as your personality and your emotions. I don't cry too easily, and I don't cry a lot. But I'd be sitting on the edge of the bed, and I would just start sobbing. I was so, I recognize it now, as depression, but I didn't recognize it then. And I can jump to this point by telling you that what I did not recognize and realize at the time is that good stress has the exact same effect as bad stress. Anything overdone, part of our principles that I'll be sharing with you, when it's overdone, has a bad effect on the body, the mind, and your relationships or whatever. It's stress is stress. Even if it's good stress, mine was turning into distress. I couldn't keep up with the family. I couldn't keep up with this. It was just too much for me. And I remember this one afternoon, sitting on the edge of the bed, sun was shining. I remember that. Birds were singing. I remember that too. And I'm sobbing, crying. And I don't know why. I can't think of any reason in my head. Marriage was great. Everything was great. Finally, I went to my wife. I had shared with her, some of the things I was feeling recently and it wasn't good. And what I really needed was a break. I needed a rest, but that's all hindsight now. Here's the plot twist, okay? So I called one of my elders and tell him how I felt, and he immediately suggested that I go out to Ohio to a Christian counseling center out there that my former denomination not only ran but still runs. Good people gave me a great treatment. I mean, as far as how they treated me, that was good too. Well, I should say that they were good. What happened to me was not so good. So I got in the car by myself, drove about 500 miles. Now I'm beginning to have tremendous anxiety along with this depression, which again, I didn't know what was happening to me. The anxiety part I recognized because it seemed very similar to what happened to me 17 years earlier. So here I am driving out, and again, I'm just frightened. But I was not paranoid. First part of the story, completely different from this part. This is a plot twist, because everything now in my life is going very, very well, better than it would for many, many individuals in whatever field that they're in. Not that many people have the kind of success that I was having at the time. And I'm driving out there wondering what's going to happen to me. And what the suggestion was is to go out to this ministry, this Christian ministry, and I would meet with a pastor and we'd talk things over. So that's what I was expecting. I was expecting that I'm going to go out and, talk to a pastor, talk some things over, get some advice, return home. When I went out there, they first of all asked me to take a test. So I said, yeah, okay, fine. So I took one of these, profile tests, one of these psychological tests, and went to see the pastor. He's a good man. He's a good man. And we talked, and I went back to my hotel room because I was staying overnight. Then I was going to return home the next morning, and suddenly the phone rang in my hotel room, and it was the pastor that I had been talking to, the counselor. And he said, I talked it over with the director, who's now deceased. And he said, Ray, have you ever considered hospitalization, meaning psychiatric? I said, no. He said, well, that's, what we're recommending. And again, well, I can't really explain it. The one thing that I hope is when I write my book, I could find the right words, like William Buckley Jr. wrote a book called The Right Word, to find the right words to explain so that I can communicate with you and those that read it exactly what I was feeling. But when he said that, it was a lot like just getting stabbed with a very sharp knife in the chest. Hospitalization, those days were long over. I was doing well. Everything about my life was doing well except for this well, let's call it what it was. It was depression. But the operative word at the time was burnout. I was burnt out. I had studied myself full, prayed myself full, preached, sang, laying hands on the sick, answering calls, going to the hospital, and on and on and on. And by the way, pastors are burning out of the ministry to the tune of about in the United States, to the tune of about 1,000 pastors per month are dropping out of ministry because it's gotten even more stressful over the years. In any case, there I am in the hotel room, and I said, I don't know, I got to think this over. It was a total shock, total shock. Hung the phone up, sat there, began crying again. I mean, it was getting worse, and the worst was yet to come. Called my wife up. I was so deflated. I was so depressed. I was so shocked. And we discussed it over the phone. She said, "Well, I don't know. You went out there for a reason." And she was as mystified as I was. Long story short, I said, I trusted God when I came out here. I would get an answer, and I'll submit to it. I can't explain the feeling, at least not now. Maybe when I write the book I can, but I can't explain the feeling of going there with my overnight bag that I had with me, checking out of the hotel, going over to the hospital, handing them my insurance card and all that. And the sound of that heavy metal door, ba-boom, shutting behind me as they put me on and ushered me on to the psychiatric ward. I'll never forget it. Never forget it. It was like an explosion, and at that moment, when I heard which I didn't share this with you in the other stories, but this is the other version, the earlier stories that I shared yesterday. So I had heard that sound so many times, but boom, it's locked and you're not getting out. And all of a sudden, I was flooded with all these memories from the past. I mean, I was totally overwhelmed. Well, they showed me my room, and again, I sat on the bed, and I wasn't crying so much as I just had my head down almost between my knees. I had a roommate. His name was Mike. And he was looking over at me, and he says, "Are you okay?" And I didn't know what to say. I said, "Well, no, not really, no." I had no idea what was happening to me. Maybe today you're in a position like that in life. You just don't know what's going on, what's happening to me. But the reason I'm sharing this story with you, the end of this, well, it's not the end of the story, but it's the plot twist. The reason I'm sharing it with you is to show you that even when you're doing well and serving God, I hadn't violated God. I mean, not dramatically, where I could put my finger on something I really done wrong. Everything was going good. I was serving Christ faithfully. And there I was locked up, just like I was 17 years earlier. And I can say that the two lowest points of my life, back in the from 1970 to 1974, nothing has ever touched that. That was really bad. But this was pretty close. And not because I was having symptoms like I explained yesterday, but because now I'm a leader, and I've been sharing my story everywhere about how Christ healed me, and now I'm locked up. And again, I didn't do anything wrong. I hadn't committed a crime. It wasn't any real reason in my mind that I should be there, but there I was. Now, I want to share with you two things that were always appallingly morbid and frightening memories of my earlier years in the psychiatric hospital. One was the shock therapy treatments that I talked about yesterday. And the other was being locked in. I only was a couple of times in this place, but hearing others in what's called the quiet room, which is anything but quiet. It's the typical padded cell. If you've not seen one, that's exactly what it is. The walls, everything's padded, so you can't harm yourself. And I remember being early on in my teens, going through this distress that I told you about yesterday, and hearing the screams of people in the quiet room banging on the walls and banging on the walls, and my heart would be just racing, racing, racing. It was very, those are two of the worst memories that I had from years ago. But again, the people were very, very, kind. They were very good people. They were good to me. So that wasn't the issue. It was what was going on inside me. I was so confused and depressed. And when that door shut and went ba-boom, everything just flooded back on me. So I was in pretty desperate straits. I kept thinking to myself, how can I go back and preach? How can I tell people about Jesus as a healer when I'm in worse condition now than, at least they're treating me like I'm in worse condition now than the people I talk to. Well, and it got worse. It got worse. I have a very strong will, and what I would do, and oh, by the way, I hope you never have to go into a psychiatric hospital, but if you do, don't go in on a Friday, which it was for me. It was a Friday. Everybody's gone. Occupational therapy, all the activities. Well, I had to spend the whole weekend with just nothing to do but think. It's kind of like solitary confinement. Anyway, some of the nurses had to come in to console me because I had no visitors. I'm 500 miles away from remotely any friend, my wife, my children, and so on. And I'm alone, really, really alone. And so they would come in and talk with me and share with me, and it was good. And I knew the spirit of it, and that was well intentioned. But honestly, it could only go so far. I still knew I was in a bad, bad place. Kept wondering, how can I go back on the radio? How can I share my story? If Christ healed me, why am I here? Well, here's the part of the twist. My roommate, it turns out, was having shock treatments. I mean, I think God does have some sense of humor, and I'm looking back on it now with some levity, but it wasn't funny then. And the room where the head of my bed was, that wall was the quiet room. I mean, I was laying in bed the first night there, well, most of the nights that I was there, and my heart is just racing, ba-ba-boom, ba-ba-boom, ba-ba-boom. So I told one of the nurses, in fact, it got so bad I went outside the hallway. I said, I can't stay in this room, you got to move me. But they assured me, no one's ever in there. It's quiet. Well, as we say, it's just my luck, which, we don't use the word luck as Christians usually, but just my luck. Second night I was there, they brought a woman in the middle of the morning, and she was out of control. Where did they put her? In the quiet room. What was she doing? Pounding on the wall, screaming. It's a lot like, how I would imagine what it's like hearing the sounds coming out of hell. That's the truth. I once told a nurse, and I don't know if she believed me or not, I said, but my experience in being, locked away in psychiatric hospitals was, in my mind, comparable to what it must have been like in a concentration camp. Now, don't get me wrong. Both earlier on and in this Christian counseling place, people treated me very well. So I'm not saying it was them. It was was inside me, the torment. So now, within 24, maybe 48 hours, I got this woman banging, screaming, and it's almost like sounds, like demons or people condemned to hell screaming. And my heart is just, I don't know how fast it was going, but it was beating crazy. Monday morning, my roommate comes. By the way, I didn't know he was having shock treatments. He came in and he was, if you ever, well, you've probably never seen anybody, but, between the anesthesia sedative they give you and then the shock itself, you just had a grand mal seizure, your lips have a tendency to turn white from the saliva and to dry up, a dry mouth. and they're wheeling him in. So I had this woman the first night, or the second night, whatever it was. I think it was the second night. Got through Sunday, and I'm barely surviving. I mean, in my head, I'm just barely making it through. And then my roommate comes in early in the morning in a wheelchair, and his lips are all white, and he's totally out of it. He can't talk. He doesn't know where he is. I told you this story yesterday about my experience. And I'm telling you, it was just getting worse and worse. I don't know why I'm here. They tell me no one's ever in the quiet room, and now all of a sudden there's the shrieks of hell coming out of it, at least for a night or two. Oh, and even when I called home, the same woman who happened to be standing by, and I'm trying to console my wife. Yeah, I'm doing all right, which I wasn't. But again, that being the man and strength thing, she starts shrieking while I'm on the phone, which only upsets my wife, so I'm trying to console her while I'm trying to console myself, and on we go. And I'm all alone. There's nobody there that I know, no one around that I know. So, Mike comes in, and in psychiatric hospitals twice a day, at least twice a day, they have a call for medication. So you line up, like you probably have seen in a movie, and they call my name. So now I'm wondering why they're calling me. And here, I remember they give me a little paper cup with these pills in it. And I said, what's this for? I said, well, the doctor ordered this. I'm not taking this. I don't need this. I don't want this. So I met my doctor, my physician, he was a Christian psychiatrist. And he asked me, please take it. I'm still wondering, why? Why? And, well, he asked me please, and I was believing that God had some purpose in this, but I had no clue. You see, bad things do happen to good people. Things don't always have, and it's sad to say this, but this is a lot of years in ministry speaking, so some stories don't always have a happy ending. Now, so far mine has. I'm really giving away the book, but so I started taking these medications, a couple of them. I remember taking a shower, and all I could say over and over again, all throughout the day, is, I will not break. I will not break. I will not break. And I felt like a prisoner. I will not break. I will not break. Taking a shower, I remember because I can still smell the soap, Ivory, Dial soap. I can still smell it. Saying to myself, I will not break. Then I would start singing, but it was really small comfort because the fear was overwhelming. The fear was overwhelming my will to not be afraid. Well, we went on for a few days like that. Slowly, I just settled into my situation. The Marine Corps has the expression, adapt, improvise, overcome. So that's what I was doing. I was doing everything I could to improvise in the situation, adapt to it with the purpose of overcoming it, which I did. That's the twist. Well, actually being there was the twist, but there is good news. So, as things were getting worse and worse by the day, the final blow came. Somewhere halfway through my stay, it was about 10 days I was there in this situation, and the final blow was one day sitting down with the psychiatrist, with the doctor. I had taken the Rorschach ink blot test. It was all the same stuff I did years ago, and I'm still wondering, why is this happening to me? There was nothing wrong with my thinking or my brain. I was burnt out. I was very, very tired. He said to me one morning in our morning meetings, he said, well, I have good news and I have bad news. Which do you want to hear first? So I said, well, give me the bad news first. He said, well, you still have schizophrenia. Well, if I had one knife, I don't know how many knives by now I had stuck all over me. That was just pushing it right in. So the good news is that, with some medication or whatever, we can control it and you'll be okay. I said, it was in my head, I was saying, no way. You see, I had experienced real schizophrenia years earlier. And this was nothing like it. This wasn't even close to it. None of the symptoms I had years ago were present anymore. When they left, they actually left. I was actually burnt out. If someone had said to me, just take a month off and rest, I would have been all right. But this is providence for you. This is when God is working out a plan in your life to bring you through pain for a purpose. And this was the lowest point in my Christian life then or ever. And I've had a lot of trials since then too. Believe me, some severe trials since then. But this was the worst. 1991. And I said in my head, I will not. I didn't tell him, the doctor. I said, I will not accept this diagnosis. I will not accept it. Just nodded my head. I just listened. Finally, they released me. Oh, by the way, the church flew my wife out. Nobody really knew the story, and I didn't want anybody to know the story. See, this is one of the things I want to cover in my book. The stigma of mental health issues. It's a terrible thing. This is going to be a major point in the book of the stigma that goes along with it, which I talked about a little bit. Hollywood making people with schizophrenia always be out, the serial killer, the madman, and it's not quite that at all. There are exceptional cases where you have someone who is a criminal, serial killer that happens to have schizophrenia besides, or is psychotic. They do exist, don't get me wrong. But the average case is not that. And so now my wife is with me. We're both in a chapel. The hospital had a chapel, and why is this happening? And she don't know. Of course, I don't know. We don't know. We would kneel down and pray. And open the Bible, read from the Psalms and some of the trials that David had and all men and women of God have. And so finally, when they released me, in my head, I said, I will not accept this diagnosis. No way, no how. But I never told the doctor. Well, I had to make subsequent trips back to Ohio. And I made some friends out in Ohio that became lifelong friends now. And so I had a place to stay when I went out, and we actually had a good time. Things were cheering up a little bit for me. And for my wife, my family would go out with me sometimes, and we spent time together with this other family. Great people, they're still great friends. And I'd make these little follow-up visits for every 3 months. Drive all the way out. But again, it was almost like a pleasure trip now because I had friends out there, so I made some friends. And about, 2 years of this, maybe a little more. Again, I have my medical records, as I told you yesterday. I had went for my checkup visit. And remember, in my mind, I was quoting scriptures, Psalm 34:4. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all my fears. That was always my foundational verse throughout my early years, and it still is a foundational verse for me. And all means all. At least it did to me. All means all fears. Well, I'm going through these trips, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then one day, the deliverance came when this doctor was sitting in a chair like mine. He kind of leaned back and he says, Ray, he says, I've been observing you now for these couple of years, and this was the victory. Originally, I called my tape that I have on it was on cassette. I haven't never transferred it over to DVD, but I called it Every Day of Victory, with a resolute will, a refusal to give in, a refusal to deny God and so forth, the victory comes. Even if it's slow in coming, it comes. Came for me. And when I went out there, and he leaned back in his chair and he said, you know, I've been observing you now for these couple, 2-3 years, whatever it was. He says, you know, and I think that we here may have misdiagnosed you. And in my heart, I'm saying, here it comes. He says, furthermore, he says, I think years ago they misdiagnosed you. So I said to him, Doctor, first of all, there is no question in my mind that years ago I definitely had schizophrenia. But God has delivered me. There's not a trace of it, and it wasn't during this experience either. Not a trace of it in my life. Christ has healed me, keeping in mind this is a Christian psychiatrist, Christian doctor. And he looked back and he said, you're right. He says, Christ, well, he used the word is healing. And I said, no, Christ has healed me. That was around 1994. And I believe, see, if I tell the first part of the story, this is actually the whole story. If I tell the first part of the story, people who suffer, especially Christians, you know, you got teachers out there that are saying, you know, Christians never have this and they never have that and blah, blah. It's all a lie. Look in the Bible. Read it for yourself. I did. And I saw that every true man of God and woman of God, some of them had incredible difficulties, not because they were sinful, it was because they were faithful to God, as I was at the time. I want to believe that I still am. I paid a heavy price for ministry, believe me. Heavy, heavy price. And, you know, I sat back and it was a kind of a gloating feeling, which I didn't communicate to him. I didn't even tell him what I had said in my head. I'm not accepting that diagnosis. No way. I don't have what you say I have. But I did tell him that day, I said, no, I had it. There's no question about it. But I don't have it now, and I haven't had it since Christ healed me years ago. That was it. I was off the medications. I would say back to normal, well, whatever in life is normal. And went on my way. And I'm still in the ministry today. And that incident there in Ohio took place, what? Well, basically 30 years ago, 29 years ago. A lot of distance, a lot of space between then and now. And there was good, you know, amount of space between my first episode with real schizophrenia and the second misdiagnosis. I wasn't angry with him about this misdiagnosis either. I knew that God, see, when you trust God, in Romans 8:28, it says, and we know that all things work together for the good of them that love God, and to those who are the called according to his purpose. There's a lot in that verse, and you should look at it and break it up word by word. But it says, and we know. The Apostle Paul was persecuted heavily, but he kept saying, this is working for good by the plan and purpose of God. Let me say this one more time. The preachers we have today, so many of them, they promise you so much glamour and Rolex watches, and you're going to drive a Rolls Royce, and that's what God's will is for you, and it's a lie. Simple. It's a lie. God's will for you is to have peace, and then he passes you through tests, that's plural, some being worse than others, as the story that I just told you was absolute devastation. But Christ, again, came through. There's other stories I could tell you. I won't have time. We're out of time today. I want to encourage you that Christ not only was a healer in the New Testament, he is a healer. He's risen, he's alive, and he's still the healer today. No matter what you're going through, if you put your faith and trust in Christ, then the psalmist said this, taste and see that the Lord is good. I've had people tell me, hey, try this here, you're going to like it. And I'm okay. So how would I know if it's good? I'm taking somebody else's word for it. God doesn't want you to take somebody else's word for his goodness and his providence and his sovereignty and his power and all that. He wants you to know it for yourself, as I do. So I hope that these videos here, my story, and then the subsequent teachings that I'll give, assuming that I get good support here and it warrants my time, but at least I gave you this much, if nothing else. I will be back again tomorrow, and I'll begin on the very first teaching, which is again a foundational part of our class, that I must never permit myself to doubt the love of God. And I shared this end of my story. This is not the end of my life story, just this one incident, these incidents. I have had the experience to know, in bad times or in good times, when you put your trust in Christ, never disappointed. Put your trust in man, well, you're setting yourself up for a disappointment, no matter who that person may be, no matter how much you love them and they love you. When you put your trust or your total, all your eggs in one basket in a man or a woman, disappointment is inevitable. But with God, who cannot fail, disappointment is not going to happen. And I've had the experience of having severe trials in my life to be able to say so with that type of confidence. Scriptures, they're true. So I hope that you'll be with me. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and please touch the notification bell that you see there underneath. And you can leave a comment for me. If you have questions, you can leave them too, and I'll try to answer them as best I can along the way, because lately I'm getting just a lot of feedback, a lot of questions and prayer requests and other things. So I'll do my best. But if you don't have Christ today, take him into your heart. Let him be your Lord and your Savior. Don't just rely on my experience. I'm giving you a testimony to encourage you to put your trust in Christ and seek him diligently with all the heart, all the soul, all the mind, and all the strength. Ask him to come into your heart and be your Savior. So God bless you. I'm glad that you were with me. I hope that this is helping, and I hope that these teachings that I'll start will be even further help to those of you who right now really need that help. God bless. Thanks for being with me. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you have gleaned something from my story. God bless you.